I want to make sure I understand what you mean by it. You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
So this isn't really a women's rights issue.
We can recognize that this impacts women while also recognizing that it impacts other groups. Those things are not mutually exclusive, Senator Hawley.
Oh, so your view is that the core of this right then is about what?
So I want to recognize that your line of questioning is transphobic, and it opens up trans people to violence by not recognizing that.
Wow, you're saying that I'm opening up people to violence by asking whether or not women are the folks who can have pregnancies?
So I want to note that 1 out of 5 transgender persons have attempted suicide. So I think it's important
because of my line of questioning? So we can't talk about it?
Because denying that trans people exist and pretending not to know that they exist.
I'm denying that trans people exist by asking you if you're talking about women having pregnancies?
Do you believe that men can get pregnant?
No, I don't think women can get pregnant.
So you are denying that trans people exist?
And that leads to violence? Is this how you run your classroom? Are students allowed to question you?
Absolutely.
Or are they also treated like this? Where
No,
they're told that they're opening up people to violence?
We have a good time in my class. You should join.
Oh, I bet.
You might learn a lot.
Wow, I would learn a lot. I've learned a lot just in this exchange.
Absolutely.
Extraordinary.
Yep.
Ms. Matzke, let me ask you something. So you provide health care to women free of charge, right? Is that right?
Absolutely.
You've done this for many years.
Yep.
You have licensed medical professionals at your pregnancy care centers. Is that right?
That is correct.
And what are some of the resources that you provide for women who come to you in a time of need?
So,
just give us you talked about it in your written testimony, but just give us a sense of it.
So we have 3 OBGYN doctors, 5 registered nurses, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, phlebotomists, medical assistants, and we provide prenatal care, OBGYN care. We provide pregnancy tests, ultrasounds, well woman visits, breast exams. We provide a wide range of medical services. Yes.
So what do you think about the DC politicians now saying that your clinic and the other 3,000 pregnancy care centers around this country are fake medical clinics? For instance, Senator Warren has said it's now more important than ever to crack down on so-called crisis pregnancy centers that mislead and deceive patients. Senator Menendez, crisis pregnancy centers jeopardize women's health and well-being, all while elevating unproven theories about birth control. Senator Warner wrote to Google asking them to censor search results for care centers like yours, saying directing women to fake clinics that traffic in misinformation is dangerous to women's health and undermines the integrity of Google's search results. Do you run a fake clinic? I mean, is that what's happening here? You don't provide actual medical care to actual women?
We absolutely do not run a fake clinic, and we have a full medical staff. Like I said, many of our medical professionals have experienced abortion for themselves, including our OBGYN doctor who used to perform abortions. So our entire medical staff is there for women, whether they choose abortion and walk out the door or whether they choose life for their baby, and we support them for years after that.
Do you think there ought to be an ideological test to be able to get medical care in this country? I mean, should we say to women, well, you have to agree with the DC Democrats' ideology, otherwise you can't go get medical care? Or maybe for you and the physicians who work at your pregnancy care center or the thousands of others across the country, should we impose an ideological test on them and say that, well, you have to agree with the DC Democrats' position on abortion or you can't provide medical care to women? Should we do that in this country?
Absolutely not.
I just want to ask in my few remaining seconds here, Ms. Harley, the Dobbs decision, as I understand it, I've read it now a number of times, it gives to voters the decision as to what laws should be pertaining to life and pertaining to abortion in all 50 states and other jurisdictions around the country. I'm just curious, do you know what percentage of voters in this country support the DC Democrats' position that they want to impose on the entire country, a one-size-fits-all rule they want to impose from the top down? Do you know what percentage of voters support their position, which is also, by the way, the same position taken by North Korea and China, other notable violators of human rights? Do you know what percentage it is?
I know that nearly 90% of Americans oppose abortion in the third trimester. The number that would support abortion up to the moment of birth has to be minuscule. It's a horrific policy.
Yeah, I mean, based on the most recent Harvard poll that was just released just a few days ago, it's less than 10% of voters say that they would support abortion into the final month of pregnancy, and yet that is the law that the D.C. politicians want to impose on every voter in America, to take this away from the people, take it away from my state, take it away from all the other states and the voters in the states, but impose this law uniformly that is not supported by 90% of the American people. Talk about anti-democratic. At the same time, they want to shut down 3,000 pregnancy care centers all around this country. That's radical. Thank you for being here.
Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Bridges, you, in your testimony, talked about the prevalence of abortion, the percentage of black babies that are aborted as opposed to non-black babies. I think you said 3 or 4 times more black babies than non-black babies are aborted. You also talk about systemic racism. Do you see any systemic racism associated with the prevalence of abortion for black babies as opposed to non-black babies?
Absolutely. The higher rates of unintended pregnancy that lead to higher abortion rates among Black people is a result of structural racism, systemic racism. I understand systemic racism not to be boogeymen who are trying to dupe Black people into abortion care. I understand structural racism to be the systems that have made it so that Black people disproportionately bear the burdens of poverty in this country, the systems that have denied them the basics that they need in order to live humane lives, like food, clothing, shelter, health care.
So you believe
a system that responds with the criminal legal
You believe there ought
system.
to be more black babies aborted, is that right?
I believe that we ought to create the conditions under which people can lead lives that are filled with dignity and humanity.
And
that
to
means
your,
being
to
able
your way
to,
of thinking, that happens when more black babies are aborted.
I believe, I love Black people with the capacity for pregnancy. I think they have agency, they have intelligence, they know what is best for themselves, and I would love to create the conditions under which they can live lives that are filled with dignity and humanity.
And do you think a baby that is delivered alive has value?
Yes.
Do you think that a baby that is not yet born has value?
I believe that a person with a capacity for pregnancy has value. They have intelligence. They have agency. They have
I'm talking about
dignity.
the baby.
And I'm talking about the person with the capacity for
And
pregnancy.
you're not answering the question. I'm asking.
I'm answering a more interesting question to
me. You think that the baby that is not yet born, let's say the day before this mother delivers, do you think that baby has value?
I think that the person with the capacity for pregnancy has value, and they should have the ability to control what happens to their lives.
Well, and I just note you refuse to answer the question. Ms. Harrell, the Declaration of Independence talks about certain unalienable rights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When do you think that unalienable right to life attaches?
Thank you. Yes, life is a human right. And when I answered Senator Booker's question earlier, that I think our laws should protect all human life, I think I was focusing on the hard part, and I didn't mean to suggest that it's a matter of congressional authority to enact the law that you described. But I do think that the American people understand that you have no rights if you don't have the right to life. That is a principle that our nation was founded upon, and every human being from its earliest existence has its own DNA and has a future. If we don't extinguish it, has a future. And that is a human right. It is the values and mores, as Senator Cruz was speaking of, that goes back to the founding of our nation, even at common law, and all the way up until 1973, when those life-affirming laws in 46 states were turned on their heads by the Supreme Court. So I believe that's what the American people believe. Life is a human right.
Governor Stratton, As I listen to your testimony, it seems to me that you're advocating for abortion at any time, for any reason, at any point during a woman's pregnancy. Is that correct?
What I'm advocating for is for everyone to have the right to determine what's best for their life, their body, and their
Any
future.
time, at any point in the pregnancy. Is that correct?
I'm advocating for everyone to have the right to make the personal decision about what's best for their life, their body, and their future. Everyone should have that right.
Do you not understand my question? My question is, are you advocating that there's a right to abortion at any time, for any reason, at any point during a pregnancy?
I'm not sure if you understand my answer, but what I'm saying
No,
is that
I understand that you're not
Okay.
answering the question.
Then
And what amazes me is the advocacy for unlimited abortion rights, where there is zero value placed on an unborn child. One reason why we haven't had conversations like this is because the Supreme Court has said you can't talk about it because it's out of bounds. It's in the Constitution, as opposed to it being decided in a forum, a legislative forum like the states. But what I don't understand is the argument that a unborn child has zero value the day before it's delivered, but then has value the day after it's born. Ms. Matzke, can you help explain that?
Thank you so much, Senator. Yes, I actually can. As a matter of fact, here in California, there's a law that's about to be passed called AB 2223. And this law basically will allow, as a woman is in the midst of a chemical abortion and she delivers a baby alive on the floor at any stage of pregnancy or in a hospital, that baby, if this law is passed, has the ability to be born alive and left to die. No matter what, a baby in the womb or outside of the womb has value. And we are not just talking about the value of a life in the womb right now. We are also talking about the value of a life in California after it is born and allowing it to die up to 28 days after birth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs was a victory for democracy in America. Abortion is an issue on which the American people have strong and passionate views and disagree, as the witnesses here at this hearing demonstrate. Those disagreements have been longstanding, and the way our Constitution operates, typically on issues in which there is sharp disagreement, it is the democratic process that resolves that disagreement. When the Supreme Court decided Roe v. Wade in 1973, 7 unelected judges said to the American people, your views don't matter. Your desire to protect innocent life doesn't matter. We know better than you, and we are going to prevent you from making decisions about protecting life. The consequence of that has been 5 decades of deep political division because the democratic process was prevented from operating. Now that a 6-3 majority of the Supreme Court has overturned that decision, questions of abortion will return to the elected branches of government. The democratic process will be allowed to operate. That will mean in bright blue states, tragically, we'll continue to see unlimited abortion on demand. And in redder states, we will see some meaningful restrictions on abortions. And those restrictions will vary state by state, depending on the values and mores of their citizens. That's how our Constitution was meant to operate. If you disagree with the abortion laws in your state, you have an outlet to express that disagreement. You have an outlet to be involved in the political process. You have an outlet to advocate for what you believe the laws should be. You're not forced to live under the rule of unelected judges operating as philosopher kings and decreeing the rules for 330 million Americans. I believe abortion's a tragedy. The over 60 million unborn children who've never breathed a breath of air, who've never lived, who've never danced, who've never hugged, who've never loved. Our country is far poorer for the millions of African American children who never had a chance to live and contribute to our country. Unfortunately, one of the consequences of the court taking this out of the democratic process is today's modern Democrat Party has become radicalized on abortion. The case Planned Parenthood versus Casey, a lot of people don't know that the Casey in question there was Governor Bob Casey, who was a Democrat and was pro-life. Today's Democrat Party has said, if you're pro-life, get the hell out. Your views are not welcome in our party. Part of the reason that Democrats in this hearing are painting the Dobbs decision in such apocalyptic terms is they know their view of abortion, which is unlimited abortion on demand up to the moment of birth, partial birth abortion with government funding, with no parental notification and no parental consent, is supported by a tiny minority of Americans. They know that the voters, when given a chance, don't support that radical view. And I will point out, there was a time when Democrats used to say the same thing. We all remember Bill Clinton, who said he wanted to see abortion safe, legal, and rare. Today's Democrat Party doesn't want it rare. It wants as much abortion as possible. Well, I'll tell you this. When Roe versus Wade was decided, one Democrat who spoke up against it was a fellow named Joseph Robinette Biden, who said in 1974, quote, "I don't like the Supreme Court decision on abortion. I think it went too far. I don't think that a woman has a sole right to say what should happen to her body." That was Joe Biden in 1974. And you may say, okay, that was a long time ago. All right, let's go to 2007, just 15 years ago. 2007, Joe Biden. Tim Russert says, you supported that ban on late-term abortions. Biden said, I did, and I do. That was 15 years ago. Just weeks ago, the Democrats in this body voted to strike down every restriction on abortion across this country, including bans on partial birth abortion, and every single Democrat but one voted for it. Now, maybe you might say, you know what, Joe Biden was out of step. Well, there's someone else who had similar views, the chairman of this committee. In a June 1983 letter, the chairman of this committee wrote, quote, I have clearly studied the issue, abortion in depth, in favor of the Eagleton Amendment, which states clearly that the right to abortion is not guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. The effect of this amendment will be to return us to the legal environment which existed before Roe versus Wade in 1973, signed Richard J. Durbin, member of Congress. That view continued. In August of 1989, Chairman Durbin wrote, and again I quote, I believe we should end abortion on demand. And at every opportunity, I have translated this belief into votes in the House of Representatives. Continued to say, I continue to believe the Supreme Court's decision in Roe versus Wade should be reversed. That was the view of a lot of Democrats not that long ago.